Hello, Montgomery Catholic, and welcome to episode 4 of Partnering with Parents. This is a super exciting topic tonight. I know that two of our favorite hosts are back with us. Lauren Hoyer from the high school, middle school and high school theology.
Yeah.
And the guy on the end, if you missed him in episode 1, he's back in episode 4, Father Connor Plessala. And guys, we get to talk about, we've talked about relationships, we've talked about dating, we've talked about theology of the body. And tonight, on Partnering with Parents, let's just take a step into the deep end, okay?
Yep.
We're going to talk tonight particularly to our older students' parents. So if you're the parent of a high school student, we're talking to you about your situation now. Mm-hmm. If we're talking to a middle school parent, we're talking to the kind of stuff that you are about to see, and actually you may already be seeing. Mm-hmm. And to our elementary parents who are listening, probably not everything that we're going to talk about tonight is appropriate for little ears, and so, or at least it would cause more questions for you to have to answer, and tonight is about how do we help you answer questions, so you may get a dry run. So just kind of to lay the groundwork, tonight is going to be about this weekend culture, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if you're a parent like me who says, what is weekend culture? It's everything you imagine. It's the things that happen when your students are not in your house or at our school. Those are the weekends. And sometimes it's Thursday night, but the weekend culture is about parties. It's about the temptations. Is that the right word?
Yeah. Absolutely.
The temptations that your students will see when they are not being supervised. And it's all the things you're imagining and more. It's drinking, underage drinking. It's being tempted to drink and be around alcohol, to provide alcohol, to have fake IDs. It's about smoking, cigarettes, tobacco, marijuana, to be able to use marijuana and tobacco in new ways. We're going to talk about vaping. If you're a parent and you're not sure what vaping is, if to you vaping is just that strange car you pull up next to on Vaughn Road and this puff of smoke comes out, yes, that's vaping. No, that's not what we're talking about. So tonight is all about those things. Lauren, Father, are we ready to jump into it?
Ready.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the first question. Why do you think it is so important to even address this weekend culture?
I've been kind of talking to the students over the past few weeks and asking them about the videos and what they've seen, and asking them about has it sparked conversation with their parents, and just kind of getting an idea on their end, really what it looks like for them as well. And one of the things that I've been talking about with them is what are the things that they struggle with in their relationship with their parents. And the thing that comes up fairly frequently is they get frustrated when they're told they cannot do something, like can't go to a party, can't do whatever, but they aren't necessarily told why. And granted, I think that there is great virtue in having to learn to be obedient even when you don't know the why. But I think sometimes as parents, even as teachers, we don't always go into the why because it's difficult. We haven't had time to look into it ourselves, whatever the case may be. And I think tonight, talking about some of these whys, the hope is that we can really empower the parents to go into these conversations really confidently and say, I know why. I know why I don't want you involved, and I can have this conversation with you and be really confident.
And the why is the reason for tonight. So Partnering with Parents tonight, we want to give you, the parent, reasons so that you can speak, from an educated standpoint to your children. So that it's not just because I said so, because it's the law. Those are valid answers, but that's not the only reason. And Father, sometimes, some of the folks watching, their kids may not be involved in this yet, or it may be something that they're around but they don't face. How do we address that?
Yeah, even if your child is not struggling with some of these topics that we'll talk about tonight, the temptations are still real, right? It is still around, and so understanding the temptations, understanding the reasons why behind the temptations, understanding the reasons why behind the virtues, and saying no to the temptations is essential for them right now. But also, as we get into college, as the kids get into college, the supervision goes down, and the access and the accessibility of temptation skyrockets, right? We have this juxtaposition, right? There's no more supervision, or there's less supervision, and there's this greater accessibility to all kinds of things, right? And so we want them to be prepared for why they should put themselves in certain situations versus other situations, right? Mm-hmm. We want to understand why Go back to the first episode of this series, right? The role of parents and the role of us helping you, right, partnering, this partnership is to form disciples. And understanding the why behind it is one of the crucial aspects in forming a disciple. It's not just a set of rules, right? This is a relationship with Jesus. This is a relationship with virtue. So understanding the why is essential.
And we only get so many opportunities as parents to form our children when they're in our home. You know, we talk about all the time at Montgomery Catholic, soon our seniors will fly the nest.
Yeah.
They'll go off to college. We'll talk about it more tonight. I mean, if we think it's hard in high school, just imagine what it's going to be like when these kids don't live in your house anymore. Every dinner is an opportunity to sit around the table and talk about tough things. Every time that you are sitting in the living room watching TV and it's a commercial, even though we all watch Netflix and there's no commercials anymore,
Yeah.
and you spark a conversation with your kids, those are the times where you cannot waste an opportunity as a parent. Seek those chances out. And, you know, Father, you just mentioned, you talked about situations. You said those temptations will arise. And so let's talk about what situations we're talking about. The cliche word is, hey, this is a high school party.
Right.
And as parents, you're going to hear, hey, so-and-so's having a get-together. So-and-so's having a party. So-and-so's having people over. I hear that all the time. People are coming over. And I want to be one of the people who go over, says your child. So these parties that we're used to, what does that really look like these days?
Right. Like, you know, I think it's important to clarify and ask clarifying questions, because we also don't want to like totally freak every parent out and think anytime a kid is asking to go hang out with people or even asking to go to a party that it's, you know, this major temptation. You know, I mean, there is kids asking to go to parties and asking to go over to people's houses, and it's very innocent. I mean, it's very innocent. You can have a quote-unquote New Year's Eve party that's 5 high school girls and 1 girl's mom, right?
Yeah.
And they're still going to use the word party. So I think as a parent, you just want to ask questions. You know, who's going to be there? Where are you going? Who are the parents? Because on the other end of the spectrum, you have parties that are kind of there's a lot of temptation, right? There is underage drinking, and there are drugs available. There might be parent supervision, or there might not be. You're also looking at sexual temptation. I mean, it can be different based upon who the kid is, where they're going, and just asking those questions will tell you a lot. It'll tell you a lot.
And it's important too for you as the parent. You know, you mentioned that very harmless high school scenario that happens in all of your homes regularly. And it's a mom or dad is at home and a few friends are going to come over. Well, the parents of the kids coming over hopefully are calling and saying, hey, so-and-so's coming over. Are you going to be there? You're going to be there the whole time. And then to ask your kids when they come home about the things that they do. And even in those situations, you know, when they have long periods of time unsupervised, conversations can drift. They talk about things at times, again, totally harmless, but they get to a point where difficult topics come up. And you, as the parent, have an opportunity afterwards to talk, hey, what did you guys do last night? What did you talk about? They're going to say nothing, fine, fun, be done. But you have to have some of that relationship already with your child, which is what we've talked about for 4 weeks. So that's super, super important. And, you know, let's say that a kid is honest. And let's say that your child says, Mom, I'm going over to so-and-so's house, and let's be honest. His mom's going to be there. His dad's going to be there. It's safe. They take up our keys. And, yes, we may responsibly drink. Well, now we've got, oh, well, my kid at least told me. Oh, they're doing it responsibly. What can a parent say to that situation?
Right. I think when you're about to have this conversation with your child, or when you go to have this conversation with your child about this specific topic, I think it's important to remember that one of the things that you can bring up is that what they're doing is surrounding themselves with the near occasion of sin. And I get a priest is saying that, and so I understand it may sound cliche, but that doesn't make it less true. It doesn't make it less valid, right? We actively pray to not surround ourselves with the near occasion of sin, right? But it's going to be responsible. Right, but it's still a sin, right? We still have to be aware of that. We still have to be aware that the temptation will be there. We don't want to set our kids up for failure, right? We don't want to throw them into the deep end and say, well, I hope they swim, right? This isn't a swimming lesson, you know? We're talking about real life decisions that can have very serious consequences, right? Most of the time, or some of the time, maybe not drastically awful consequences, but do we want to play that game, right? Do we want to play the odds of what if something does happen, right? What we're talking about here is also setting your child up for success, right? Allowing them to understand what are good environments for them to put themselves in, what are bad environments to put themselves in, right? It's very important, especially moving into college.
You're exactly right. That's what I was going to say. You know, a good environment versus a bad environment might be easy for a high school student to decipher with the help of a parent.
Right.
But for a senior, we're talking 3 months from now. They're going to be having to make that decision about what's a good environment or a bad environment for them, what occasion of sin they will be near.
Right.
And we've got to do that without the parent. So now's the time to help teach them, and you foster that ability to decipher between good and bad, and the parent plays a major role in that.
Right, and it's a very good point, and we have to understand that the brain, like the ability to make long-term decisions, decisions that have long-term consequences, doesn't fully form in us until we're about 25.
Yeah.
Right, which is, we have to remember that, right? And so
especially boys.
Exactly true.
Especially
talking from experience,
boys.
right? We understand that, right? So we have to understand that when we're talking to our kids about like, no, I don't want you to go to this situation because it's not good. Well, I'm going to be fine, right? I'm going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen. Well, we don't know that. We haven't done that, right? And so we just have to understand and help them form in that way.
Absolutely. And Lauren, in a second, I'm going to ask you, tell our parents, how do we know what's a good environment, what's a bad environment, what are some things we need to be aware of, looking out for? But I just want to pause about halfway through here. If you have questions that you would like to offer the group, please, you have two options. You can either post those live in the group chat in the YouTube, or in the group chat. Miss Baranko is monitoring that, and also I believe her email is posted there, abaranko@montgomerycatholic.org. You can send right now, if you're watching us live, not if you're recorded, send us your questions if you would like us to expand further, or to just go down a particular rabbit hole that you may be chasing in your own lives. But send us your questions at the end of the broadcast. In about 20 minutes time, we'll have an opportunity to do that. Another option for you, if you've been tuning in for 4 weeks, you have now seen 4 different sets of people. You've seen 3 different physical sets. And if you want to offer a little suggestion in the comment box about which set you liked best, whether it's the table, the microphones on the table, or the 3 chairs where you could see a whole lot more of this guy, don't be afraid. Put that in there. We want your feedback. Both of you tuning in, we're glad you're with us. All right, good environments, bad environments. Tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So some questions that you might want to ask if your kid is planning to go to a party or something like this is, I mean, as basic as it is, are there going to be illegal things happening? And so you don't even have to ask it that obviously, but I mean, just inquiring, like, are people going to be drinking? Are people going to be staying the night, right? Are boys and girls going to be staying the night at the same place? That is something that happens, and that gets really, really dicey. And I think, one of the things that we've talked about, as a parent as well, is as a parent, one of the cool things that you can talk about with your kid is, even if they're like, I'm going to go and it's going to be great, I'm going to be the example, I'm not going to drink, I'm going to be all of these things. One of the really cool things that you can bring up as the parent is talking about, but if you're there, it's still an endorsement of what's happening around you. Right. And that is huge in teaching them when they get to college, right? That idea of, they might think they're strong enough to go to a party and not drink underage, or to go to a party and not engage in these things. But if they can fall back on that same idea for themselves, even of like, but if I'm there, I'm endorsing what's happening. That's just a really strong point, I think, for parents to instill when they get in a harder environment later, right? I think that's really helpful.
Lauren, let's talk about some of the real things. We say, are illegal things happening? Turn the flashlight on, get in your kid's face. Not really. I mean, we want to be able to give the why too. Yeah. So what are some of the things that our parents can say to their kids about why it's important. I ask you, Lauren, because you live with a resident expert, okay? Your husband, Dennis, is a PhD student in psychology. He studies substance abuse, addiction. He deals with exactly what we're talking about. He's like the next step. All right, we live in the temptation. Hey, what happens?
Yeah.
You get to hear about this all the time. So kind of give us the real facts.
Right, absolutely. So, you know, when I was thinking through some of this, even, I mean, I talked to my husband, right? I talked to him and asked him, you know, what? Because we can get into, like, we know these things are illegal. We know that kids are going to ask the whys. We know all of this, but what are some of the facts, the statistics, the things that I can use to help my kid really understand why? And one of the things with underage drinking that he and I talked about was the idea that one of the most well-studied statistics or research done in underage drinking is that the younger that you start drinking, the more likely you are to develop a substance abuse later, the more likely you are to abuse alcohol later. And so if my 15 or 16-year-old is starting to drink, they are more likely, and this is very well established research, they are much more likely to develop abuse of that alcohol later in life. And it does look, and it kind of tapers off as you get closer to the age of 21. So we know that to be true, and we know that we can use that in talking to our kids about you know, not wanting them to drink this early, because we don't want them to struggle with that later in life.
So what you're saying, students who, or young people who wait to start drinking until they're 21 or closer to 21 are less likely to develop abuse, alcohol use disorders. You know, it's like you're starting that clock. And if you start the clock in high school at 15 or 16 or 17, you got to remember when they're in the danger zone at 19 and 20, they're not in your house anymore. And they're not at the party where the two parents are monitoring it. And they have allowed themselves down that slippery slope, and now they can't fight temptation, and they start making bad decisions. Absolutely. They rationalize, oh, I'll just do this now. And then boys and girls get involved. Nothing good happens. And then cars get involved. Nothing good happens. And frankly, you know, our young people in these social situations, nothing good happens, even just with them kind of in this pot altogether, you know? I mean, nothing good. And we haven't even talked about marijuana or vaping yet. You know, this is, we're getting there. And so now while you're spending time as a family, it's super important. Now, can we transition a little bit?
Absolutely.
Something that's a little less common that our students struggle with is marijuana use. Now, you know, to our parents, let's be honest, when we think of marijuana use in high school, it's kids sitting around at a party, sharing, and puff, pass, or whatever it is. I'm showing my ignorance here. There are so many more options for kids to use marijuana now. And I lean in to say this because it's that important. It's not just, hey, can I get my hands on a blunt? Hey, can I, you know, I know somebody who has marijuana and we're going to smoke. Or marijuana can be ingested now in so many different ways. And one of the ways that it can be ingested now too, that active THC agent, is through vaping. So marijuana use is important, but vaping that active agent of marijuana is huge. And we call marijuana a gateway drug because, again, as soon as you open that gateway, what happens next? As soon as I start drinking early, what happens next? You know, those things are super important. So what are some talking points parents can use when talking to their kids about marijuana?
I mean, anytime that it's brought up in my classroom and the kids ask about it, you know, a big thing is like, they always want to point out, well, there's all these different opinions and people don't know if it's bad or not, right? And I know that that's probably going to be in a conversation with a parent as well. But one of the things that we do know for sure that, you know, experts across the board are really agreeing on is that when marijuana is used before the age of 25, because like Father Connor said, like that's when brain development, you know, kind of stops or is fully done. But before the age of 25, when marijuana is used, it affects the development of their brain. Like there is a negative impact on the development of their brain. And I mean, I've kind of witnessed that with people that I, you know, went to high school or college with, and I mean, I saw people lose scholarships or not be able to think through things as quickly or problem solve because of the effect that it had on their brain.
So can we just acknowledge something that's kind of tough to acknowledge? In our world today, adult recreational use of marijuana is something that is widespread and accepted in so many cultures, in so many states and communities, and in families. We're not talking about recreational use of marijuana in an adult. We're not.
Right.
These 25 and over guys, we're not partnering with those parents. We're partnering with you to help raise your under 25-year-old kids who are at a major disadvantage when they begin to ingest these chemicals.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Father, talk a little bit about some of the consequences.
Right. It can definitely have consequences. One of the studies that's come out, I believe, that said students that use marijuana, especially the younger they are, under college age and getting into college, I think it's at about 50% more likely to need a semester off, right? And not that a semester off means that you're a bad person, but like you need it because you are unable to function correctly, right? And as to the aptitude of others around you, right? And so it does have consequences. It is an impaired of your judgment, right? And so the morality of it, right? If I could just kind of sum it up real quickly, the morality of marijuana is a long, deep conversation with a whole bunch of nuances. The short of it is this, okay? It is immoral because, one, it is illegal. Okay, good point. Well, let's say it's made legal. All right, it's still immoral because, kind of like when you're drunk, you surrender your humanity. Okay, now what that means, I understand it's a weird phrase that you may not have heard before. I understand that. So what I mean when I say that is when you surrender your humanity, you are impairing your free will, right? Our free will is what makes us different than other animals, right? We have the ability to choose, right? But when you impair your judgment, when you impair your intellect and your free will, you're doing exactly that. Your judgment is impaired. Your judgment is cloudy, and kind of like when you're drunk, you tend to make bad decisions, right? You can't really think through what's going on, right? And so marijuana is immoral.
Absolutely. We talked about marijuana being able to be ingested in so many different ways. There are edible treats that you can use to ingest marijuana. There are ways to smoke marijuana, and there are ways to vape marijuana. Mm-hmm. Now, vaping, which is not always marijuana, can be nicotine, tobacco. Mm-hmm. The amount of a cigarette, or the number of cigarettes kind of in a vape is a big question you hear kids talk about, and parents, you need to know this. And if you don't know what a vape is, I have an option for you, or I have an example for you. I know that this looks innocent, but this is what we call a vape or a vape stick. You'll hear words like Juul. There are all different types of vapes. And this is something that charges literally in your computer. It plugs into a USB port. So you may think that it is a jump drive plugged into your child's computer, when in fact it's not. It's a vape stick. And they have disposable pods. And I'll hold this up. So this one is pretty empty. It was used, and yes, this was confiscated at school. And this pod is filled with juice. And that vape juice will give a student, or the person vaping, these are all weird words to me, vaping the equivalent of about 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine. And you know, the ability for them to ingest that so easily is one of our major concerns. This is not the only option for what these look like. And I'll leave it right there, awkwardly. They can also be called vape pens, where they look like cylindrical pens. And they look like a ballpoint pen without a tip on it, typically. Some of them are flatter and wider than this. And they're all different types. But they, again, have to be charged. They have to have some kind of pod or juice, and they can all be ingested. From this, from this you do not get a huge puff of air, or of vapor like you see in that car of that weird guy I was talking about. What you do see is almost nothing. What you do smell is almost nothing. Mm-hmm. And if you do smell something, sometimes it'll be fruity, sometimes it'll be different. It'll be different. If you sense a smell in your vicinity and it is not normal, it could be a vape. Now, if you're a parent and you think your kids aren't doing this, you need to go and look in the mirror and say to yourself, you could be wrong. In our high school and in every high school around the city, 3 out of 5 students are using these vapes. So if your high schooler right now is at the Trinity soccer game sitting in the stands with 4 of their friends, if your kid's not doing it, 3 of the people they're sitting with are, or they have access to one, or it's in their car, or it's something they've considered. They can get these anywhere. You can buy them off eBay. You can get them at a gas station, and they know which gas stations to go to. This is where I sell out all your kids, and I'm sorry, kids. I'm selling you out because these are bad. Now, I talked on that longer than I was supposed to, but I'm very passionate about how dangerous these guys are, and they are virtually impossible to even see or smell or know. They will want to use them all the time. Let's talk a little bit about that. I will stop talking and let you guys talk a little bit.
Right, so the things that can be in the vapes, we were talking about liquid nicotine, CBD, or marijuana, which you mentioned. And kind of the interesting thing about if marijuana is in a vape, it's not going to smell. It's not going to smell like you would expect marijuana to smell.
A Pink Floyd concert.
Yeah, it's just not going to smell. But what is particularly dangerous, I think, about the vapes is that the liquid nicotine really metabolizes really quickly, which in turn makes people get addicted really quickly. And also, like, because it's metabolizing really quickly, once you get to that point of addiction to that nicotine, you need it, I mean, every 20, 30 minutes to not start to have withdrawal symptoms, not start to get sick. So,
wait a minute. If we're saying our kids are addicted to these, our class periods are 53 minutes long.
Yes, so they have to go to the bathroom in every class. Yeah, and we see that. I mean, we know that there are kids who are struggling with that. They're struggling with that. And I think even I say struggling because I don't think a lot of the kids realize when they start vaping that they really can get addicted. I don't think that they realize like that it can become such a big habit in their life. It seems harmless. It seems like everybody's doing it. And then they get to a place where they need it every 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, and so why are they doing it? They're using it to cope. They want to deal with stress. What is it,
right. You know, so this is a concept that we are all very familiar with, no matter if we are a parent, if we are a child, if it's us 3 right here. If we're removed from the situation, all humans deal with this concept, which is coping, right? Specifically to relate it to this, right? We all our kids turn to some of these things, right? The 3 things that we're really talking on tonight are drinking, so alcohol, marijuana, and vaping, right? We turn to them, the kids turn to them to cope, right? To cope with everything going on in their life, right? They have a lot of things going on. Let's just be very honest about this, okay? Kids have a lot of things on their plates because we allow them to have 1,000 things on their plates, and we sign them up for 1,000 things on our plates, right? So they have school, they have different sports, they have different activities, they have different friend groups, they have different trips, they have different this, different that. They have so much stuff going on, right? And so they're stressed.
And this becomes a quick fix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kids are stressed, kids have fears, they have anxieties, they have insecurities, they have all this kind of stuff. And so they cope, right? Coping is nothing new to any of us. Some of us cope by working out a ton, right? Healthy as it is. It can be a coping mechanism. Some of us turn to golf, selfishly so. I like to, right? Whether it's video games, whether it's drinking, right? As adults, or our phones, right? Social media, right? I mean, we spend so much time on our phone. You're at a red light. The first thing you do, on your phone, right? Because whatever it is. So coping is very common to all of us. We all understand it. We're all aware of it at least. And that's what our kids are doing, right? And so we don't want them to turn to these things to cope, right?
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is they're solving non-nicotine or non-marijuana, non-alcohol related issues with those quick fixes, right? Which which is what we're telling them to do is what we're allowing them to do, what we're allowing them to do is to not face their problems, right? And by running away from a problem, I don't know if that's really ever fixed one, right? You have to face your insecurities, you have to face your stress and realize that this too shall pass, right? How to deal with stress, right? In a healthy way.
Kind of sounds like the plot to The Wizard of Oz. Now we're gonna have a couple of questions here in just a second. Again, if you want to post those in the live chat, this is about to be the end of our live portion here. Or if you want to email them to Elena Baranco, abaranco@montgomerycatholic.org. If you are for some reason still watching this and it is just the recording posted on our YouTube channel, and you ever have a thought or a question, you can send us your questions, your thoughts, your suggestions at any point. You can tell us that we're crazy and send us that in an email too. We're getting really good at listening to that kind of stuff. But definitely send us your suggestions, your thoughts. You know, one final thought too, and it's not just about the drinking, it's not just about marijuana, and it's definitely not just about these vapes. I think one of the things that the three of us and all these people behind the camera are so concerned about is that your student is not aware of how serious any of it is. And they don't really understand that it can get them in trouble, that it can get them hurt, that it can get them in legal trouble. And you know, just having this device, a student may think it's just a vape. That's one of the hardest things that I hear a student say. I mean, it's just a vape. Yeah, that's right. It's like having a pack of cigarettes in your pocket, which is totally illegal at school and on school property. And I'm talking about in the gym at a basketball game. I'm talking about in the stands at a football game. If you're on school property and you're a student and you have one of these, you're getting suspended. There's serious consequences. You do it twice, this may not be the school for you. This is a serious issue. Why? Because if it's not your child who's doing it, you don't want your child sitting next to the kid who could get them addicted, period. And that goes for all of our kids. Because we just said 3 out of 5 are doing it. And that all of our kids are going to be tempted. They're going to fall. And that's something that Partnering with Parents really wants to focus on. We're not always going to get it right. We don't get it right. My kids, when they're in high school, the statistics say that they're going to be doing this. One of them, I got 3 at least. So, just 3.
For now.
It's very important that you understand that as a parent, you don't have to get all this right. So tonight on Partnering with Parents, we've talked about underage drinking. We've talked about marijuana temptation and use. And we've talked about vaping. All very serious, but all things that you as the parent need to have tough conversations with your kids about. We are ready to support you and have tough conversations at school, and we hope that you are ready as well. All right, so Ms. Branco is going to speak loudly, and then I'll regurgitate the question to you. We're going to turn our attention this direction. And Ms. Branco, any questions, comments?
Yeah, we do have a question.
We do have a question.
Yeah. I'm having trouble visualizing why it's so hard for teenagers to cope with stress and why they need substance.
All right, so we're having a hard time visualizing is the question. Why my teenager is having a hard time coping with stress, and why do they turn to substances to help cope? Lauren, I think you're the one to answer that.
Well, my husband has given me a nice visual that I often use with students, like a lot. When they come in and they say, you know, they're struggling with X, Y, Z, and I start to ask questions, you know, well, do you use this thing or do this thing when you start to feel bad or stressed or whatever it is? And if the answer is yes, then I always go back to what my husband has taught me. And it's kind of this idea of, for all of us, anxiety is really an ebb and a flow. For stress, it's an ebb and a flow. Like it comes up and it goes down. But what we can get into a habit of is when that anxiety starts to rise, we want to cut it off because it feels bad. When that stress starts to rise, I want to cut it off because it feels bad. And an easy fix is if I use a vape, it relaxes me right away. If I drink, it cuts off the anxiety right away. But what kind of happens over time is if I keep cutting it off at the top, I don't learn that anxiety will ever fall on its own. And so I start to feel like I have to cut off all bad feelings all the time. And that's really where addiction stems from. That's where addictions start. And that can be anything, right? It can be the things we talked about. It can be phones. It can be naps, whatever it is. But if we can learn to take that part out and just feel that ebb and flow, that up and down, it gets smaller and it gets less. And then I know that I can handle anxiety and I can handle stress. And our kids need to know that. They need to know that they can handle those things, especially going into college.
Big time, big time. Great answer. My goodness.
It's my husband.
Any other questions? That was the only one that got submitted. All right, so tonight, so we're 35 minutes into Partnering with Parents, episode 4, and we have talked about tough stuff. You know, we started 4 weeks ago when we got into this project in the beginning of Lent to say that parents, your job is hard. we think our job is worth it, and together we can do our best to get it right. That's kind of the whole idea behind all this. And just like Father Connor reminded us tonight, your job as a parent, we are building saints. We are creating disciples. And the world that our young disciples are living in is difficult and crazy. And there are more people in the world telling your kids the opposite of what we just said tonight. And so you have to join us. We have to empower you. You support us. This is a great relationship we have, and we can fight, even if we just save one child from resisting that temptation that one time. The ripple effect in their life and in the lives of the people they're around was worth it. So thanks again on behalf of all of us at Montgomery Catholic. I'm Justin Castanza, your school president, with Lauren Hoyer and Father Connor Plessala, parochial vicar at St. Bede Parish, saying good night.